What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 48th episode of Tequila Tuesday, Scotty's Little Sales Club, powered by Sendoso, our official sending sponsor. Thanks for everybody for joining us, checking in from wherever you are in the world. Some people overcoming some sickness, somebody driving, somebody holding their niece. It's all good. We're here to learn and have a little bit of fun, have some laughs, and maybe shed a tear or two, at least from our guest, who is going to share some painful experiences, of which I'm sure that I'll be able to relate to. In particular, lessons learned from a quote, self-quoting failed CRO, by the way. Our guest is one of our fellow patrons, Mike Simmons, who is a glutton for punishment, let's just say, as a New York Jets fan and long-suffering, mediocre to poor golfer, who I'll be golfing with in Florida in a couple weeks. And anyway, Mike is a lot of fun, a good friend. He's the king of the whiteboard you see behind him. I'm sure he cannot resist using it. Welcome to Tequila Tuesday, Mike.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. And I cannot resist using it. So if there's any reason that I should draw anything up on the whiteboard or put anything up there, you're just going to be speaking to my heart. So questions that relate to that are good. I am, Scott just said, I'm a Jets fan. You don't want to follow any of the sports teams that I follow. The Islanders went on a run the last two seasons, and unfortunately, it does not look like they're going to make the playoffs this year. So, unfortunately, last year in June, we got to go see Game 1 when they played the Lightning, and then Sean, my at the time 18-year-old, I jumped on an airplane, flew back for Game 7, which was pretty cool. So, I asked Scott, I said, hey, would you be interested in me joining to share this story? And it was a failure. The reason it was a failure is when I agreed to join the company as a CRO, was a client of mine, and I'd worked with the organization for a fair amount of time. So you'd think that I had access to everything, had seen everything, but I didn't. There's a big difference between working with an organization and working in an organization, and things start to change a little bit when that relationship shifts. But I am happy to share lessons, share perspective, share reasons why I did what I did, and then reasons why I decided to do what I did in September, which is leave the role right in the middle of going through a Series B raise, and the Series B should be announced here shortly. It's been sitting out there for a little bit of time. So most people would look at the data and say, you're an idiot. Ultimately, I had to put myself in front of what I was doing inside the business. And again, I'm happy to share those lessons. So keep it interactive, keep the questions coming. I will be candid. I will be direct. The thing I ask you to consider is this is my version of the story. There's a lot of other people who probably have different versions of the story. So that's their perspective. This is mine. Again, happy to answer any questions. So where to begin? I started a consulting practice back in 2015 because I wanted to run my own business. I wanted to start a business. Went through the process of building that up with a co-founder. And then we went through the ups and downs of starting a practice. We had as many as 18 people inside our organization. And then we're down to, I have one W-2 employee still inside the business. The co-founder exited the business in 2018. I continued to take it through. The way that I was introduced to the company that I'm working with is they were a product that we were selling within a client of ours. The product is CybSafe. It's a human factor risk security software. So you think about it, cybersecurity space, human factor risk, really hot place. Why not do the work in there? Built out the sales team inside a partner group focused on cybersecurity. The guy who I brought along to lead that, or brought up leading it, had transitioned from a finance background into sales. And that has been my gift, is helping people transition from non-traditional sales roles into sales roles through basic process fundamentals, tools, templates and tools and coaching. Fast forward a bit later in 2020, I went out to meet with the company in the UK, CybeSafe. They were seed funded, about 40 people inside the organization, did some training for the team. Things went really well. And I was supposed to be out there 8 weeks later. Unfortunately, COVID hit in March, which changed things a little bit, which actually turned into be a really good thing, because if there's one person that I would throw the keys to in a time of crisis inside an organization, it would be me. Because one, I don't mind getting into the weeds like Scott and I have talked about. I actually enjoy doing that kind of work, and I will grind and work hard to do just about anything. Ultimately, fast forward through the next couple of months, we end up having to lay a couple of different people off. Then things start to pick up where it looks like we're going to get the A round. We get an injection of cash, and I joined the organization, agreed to join the organization in January of 2021. I had already implemented all the process stuff inside the organization. Catalyst sale process, coaching of the team, everything's in place. What I did not, and this was failure number one, I did not accurately assess what it meant to go from working with a company to working inside a company again. And I'll just pause there. And I see some smiling and nods. So some people have gone through this. Any comments or questions or things to share as I take a breath and have a drink?
How about some of the people who gave some funny looks? Who gave the looks? Wayne.
I saw Wayne. I saw Wayne smile.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just something weird, isn't there? I mean, anyone that's outside of a company, that's consulting, it's just kind of strange how you're just viewed very differently when you're not on the books and you're as an external consultant. And the moment you switch to the W-2, it's like you're owned. And at the point at which you're owned, like the kind of your opinion just comes with a different color, comes with a different taste. It's kind of odd.
Yes. Any other comments or questions on why that happens? Well, I think Wayne hit on it. I felt like I was owned right away. So then the next thing I ran into is I didn't properly onboard. I didn't take the first 90 days, even first 30 days, to just reset things and say, okay, I want to take some time and focus on doing the things that I would do if I joined a company for the first time. This put me into an early stage kind of reactive mode where I was never felt like I was proactive. I never felt like I was in front of things. At the same time, we're building out the leadership team. So VP, Chief Product Officer joins on. COO is going through the interview process. Reason COO is going through the interview process is the existing COO announces he's leaving in June. Fast forward a couple of months later, the CFO leaves the organization. So we've got all of this turnover and change that's happening inside the leadership team. And mistake number two, beyond not onboarding properly, mistake number two, because I was in a reactive mode or felt like I was in a reactive mode, didn't properly lead the organization through those changes or through those transitions. Now, there are some people who say, dude, you're not the CEO, you're not leading the organization. I didn't lead the CEO through those changes in the way that I should have. I was just in a reactive mode and it sucked. One of the reasons I was in a reactive mode, I've always been the person who was up first on my team. I'm a West Coast guy. I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. If anybody knows anything about where the UK is, what time is that for people in the UK?
10:30.
Yeah. That's if I got up at 3:30 in the morning, half of the year, Scott.
Yeah.
So most of the time I was getting up at 11:30, sometimes 12:30 in the morning, and I was getting up and going right into calls. So I went from my most creative moments in the day, up ahead of everybody, proactive, thinking, writing, getting ahead, to all of a sudden I'm in meetings, and I was in meeting hell. Just meeting after meeting after meeting, which is what CROs run into inside organizations. you're meeting with different people across the organization, you're meeting with customers, you're meeting with, et cetera. So I know a lot of this stuff, I hope none of this stuff comes across as an excuse. These are all realities of the situation. I was in a reactive mode. I wasn't leading effectively, and I didn't take the time to onboard properly. And oh, by the way, now it's time to bring on my first couple of hires. And I missed with our head of demand gen. There was a disconnect between me, the board, and the CEO relative to what we were hiring for in that role. I was looking for a role player, someone who could just do demand gen. That was what we were going to plug this person into. Ultimately, hindsight being 2020, I should have hired a chief marketing officer or a VP of marketing, someone who was further on down the road, not someone who was going to help build while we were building in flight. I could talk a bit about how I made that mistake and things I would have done differently in the hiring process. And most of you, when I say what I would have done differently in the hiring process, your response is going to be no shit. But when you're in the middle of this, you
a lot easier to see once you're out of it.
It is so
looking
much
in,
easier.
right? Yeah,
so much easier. So that was the first marketing role I'd ever hired. So what do you think my process was to hire the marketing role? Anyone want to?
Message a few friends and try to convince them to join you.
Did that, and I couldn't. I tried to get I wanted to see if Gaetano was somebody who was even interested in exploring the whole thing. Talked to a couple of people. Did that. Talked to a lot of the people we know in the network to understand, how do I hire this role? Like what does the interview process look like? What should I be looking for with someone at this stage as I go in and I ask those questions? The most important part to my hiring process when I bring people on is identifying coachability. And the way that I identify coachability, and really kind of gets into internal versus external locus of control, it's put them in a situation where they have to demonstrate doing the work, critique the work, provide feedback, direct feedback on the work, and see how they respond. Imagine me, never do anything for marketing, know that demand gen is not my strength. And I'm just like, oh yeah, well, yeah, that sounds good. That was a good answer. And so that was a shit way to go through the process of hiring. The other thing I made a mistake on, and I actually even had that person go through and talk to one of the people I had asked for some help with to vet the person, and they passed that person. So they were vetted by somebody who I trusted inside the space. So, but the biggest mistake I made, I did not include other members of the team who were currently doing some of those roles in the hiring process. I should have had them be part. We had content who was still responsible for doing some things on the website, and we had design who were doing some things on the website. Both of them were part of the product organization, not the revenue organization. I bring in a marketing person who's going to take over that stuff, wants to start leading. And as soon as that happened, there was pushback. Like, this is not how we communicate inside this organization. And if there's one thing that drives me absolutely batshit crazy, that's not how we do things here. This is the way we've done it. You know what? If you're going to keep doing it the way that you've always done it, you're going to have similar freaking results. Let's start shifting and changing. But I did not manage that well. So multiple ways that I failed as a leader, and we're only in like the April, May, starting to become the
first 60 days. First 60 days still?
No, we're still now I fast forwarded into that 6-month period. So for past 90 days into that April, May, June, I had the demand gen person, her first day was April 9th.
Okay.
Her first day was April 9th.
Mike, can I ask a question? Just to
fire away.
Stats. Yeah. You mentioned that before you took on this role, you were a consultant for the company. So just curious, when they asked you to take on the role, were some of these things apparent to you, or were you trying to solve them as a consultant? And how was it different? I know what you and Wayne said about when you're a consultant and you join the company, how you're seen differently, that I get. Yeah. But the information that you had access to as a consultant, how did that inform some of the decisions you made when you came on board, or your understanding with the founders who hired you? I'm just trying to see if there's any throughput.
Yeah, really good question. So one of the first roles that was eliminated when we had to start letting people go in the September, October time period before the raise. So this is in the middle of or end of 2020 was the current VP of marketing. So we let the current VP of marketing go. We brought in the consulting firm that was doing PR work for the organization. We brought them in to do demand gen work. The team that I ultimately brought in to do demand gen work in the first month that I was working inside the business was the organization that lost out to that PR firm, and the PR firm wasn't delivering what we needed to from a demand gen perspective. So there's a lot of, like everything else, Jill, there's like, as you pull back layers, you get into the details. So you start to say, oh crap, when this rock comes up, there's more shit here. And then when that one comes up, there's more shit a little bit lower. But we let the VP of marketing go in October. My view of the world when I joined on was we have a decent runway here, and there's a high level of alignment relative to the way that we're building the business. I joined to help build the business. I then realized that I think the biggest difference was there was a lot of pressure. The investors who were actively involved in it had strong background in marketing. So started to question a lot of the stuff we were doing inside the organization from a marketing perspective. And that there were voices that were going on. And I said this, I also, when I'm ready to blow shit up, I just blow shit up. Like that's another, just a negative piece on me. That, someday I'll learn, but we ran into, there were times when I knew that there were outside influences that were creating questions about what we were doing. And that was creating more pressure than I was prepared to handle. Had I hired a chief marketing officer, had I actually, hindsight being 2020, if I could do it over again with all the data I had, rather than join as a CRO, I would have had them take that money, apply it to a chief marketing officer, continue to build the revenue side of the organization out in the background. And then when they were ready, come back in at that point in time. That's what I would have done a bit. That's what I would have done a bit differently. And it would have given me a little bit more flexibility from a time perspective. But Jill, I don't know if that answered your question, but that was the chief marketing.
That's an interesting perspective. It was just, I was a little bit confused when you said the first person you had to let go was the VP of marketing, and then that's the position you should have hired. So was the person the wrong person for the job, and you should have found the right person?
I hired too low. I hired too low. I hired in the model of, we're in the process of building things. We don't have a lot of the systems and process stuff in place right now. We're still trying to figure some things out, meaning, from a product market fit perspective, we wanted to be a data-driven organization, but the reality of the companies that were buying from us were they were looking at something a bit different. When we started to do some of the system integration work, we realized it was really tough and we couldn't be a Splunk. So that was the wrong direction. We weren't going to engineer that kind of work. So we were going through some growing pains as an organization relative to identity crisis that didn't necessarily align with what we were saying in the market and the type of customers that we were bringing on and the type of customers that we had existing inside the organization. So if we would have brought in, my view was, if we bring in a VP of marketing, a chief marketing officer, they're going to come in and they're going to see all of these things that still need to be connected. And we're not going to be able to leverage that capability. So let's just get someone who focuses specifically on demand gen, a demand gen tool, have the demand gen come in, start getting that piece going. And in hindsight, that was looked upon as, I didn't feel comfortable hiring somebody that might be more senior than me. Or it's amazing the stories that come around, because for people who've worked with me long enough, I don't take myself too seriously. I don't deal with a lot of, I don't care a lot about the bullshit about egos and more senior. And if you want to take on certain things, take it on, just make sure the work gets done. But the narrative that was told was, I didn't want to compete with another executive at that point in time.
Yeah.
All right. We got a couple questions here.
Far away.
I want to go to. Let's go to Zach first of all. Whoops, sorry, Jill. Zach, you're up.
Hey, Mike, I had a question about what you said earlier.
Yeah.
I had a really poor experience of having a non-sales background VP of sales who took over, who came from the founder, worked with him in a previous company, was very successful. And
non-VP, hold on. Non-VP of sales background, VP of sales?
Non-sales
he became
Yeah.
sales.
Yeah, this was his
I thought you were going to go with a non-sales background CEO, but you went non-sales VP of sales. Very weird.
I didn't know if that was strange, but Mike, you made the comment earlier of you're really good at coaching up these people who have that non-direct sales background and getting them in that position. Did I misunderstand that correctly? Or
Yeah, so the sales director who's inside the organization, who will likely be a VP of sales inside that organization, is the guy who his first sales role was me helping him in a company that I did business with, which was a company called Intuition, which was a partner of CybeSafe. We were selling CybeSafe technology. That's how I ended up meeting the founders of CybeSafe, is through that relationship. So James has a finance background and is a phenomenal seller and will be a phenomenal sales leader as he continues to get opportunities to grow.
And my question with that too is, how much involvement is it the CEO's job, if you were going to take on that change, to be very involved in the coaching of that VP of sales? And how do you balance that with also, you're on such a fast moving ship that it's hard to dedicate your time and resources to be able to do just that?
I don't think it's their job, because the CEO of the company doesn't have a background in sales. So that's another, like if I think of ideal customer profile for me, it's technical founders, professionals who do not have a background in sales, who are really passionate about a product that they're building. Oz didn't have a background in sales, so he didn't need to coach James up. He didn't need to do any of those things. That was never part of it.
Got it.
Yep.
That clarifies. I think I was a little confused there. So thank
you.
Well,
I'm thinking about all the stuff I dumped on everybody for the first, 15 minutes of just like what. I'm happy to answer questions and clarify anything.
Yeah, we've got a couple. I'm still just shocked and appalled by Zach's comment of a VP of sales who doesn't have a sales background. I'm just like,
hey, some people want to try things, Scott. Come on, just give.
Well, I would like to try being an astronaut, but that shit ain't happening either. There's a reason.
A blue origin, it could happen.
There's a reason.
Scott, I think
I'd like to try surfing 100-foot wave, but I'd probably die. This is very similar to Zach's, non-sales background VP of sales. Go ahead, Zach.
I think he made it 8 months, and then that really caused a lot of disheartened sales reps, and it was almost like he had one shot to do it correctly, because they just bought another company, acquired acquisitions, everything was changing, and it just destroyed morale.
I'm actually shocked he made it 8 months. He hit the over on that one. If you're a gambler, I would have took the under on 8 months on that one. Let's go to Ben. Ben had a good question.
Yeah, I've got a question about your relationship with the board and how to work with them.
Yeah.
So I have a scenario that happened to me I want to share, and then also you said that the board members had this marketing background, and so I thought, well, maybe collaborating with the board members to hire this marketing person could have been a good idea. But then it made me think of, I was working on this $500,000 deal with State Street Bank, and I'm an early employee of this company. We had a new CRO, and I was working on him for doing this deal. But then I also was connected with one of our board members who mentioned, oh, I could text the president of State Street. And the CRO was like, stop talking to board members. I'm running this, we're going to work on this together. Don't talk to them. So I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on how to manage your relationship with board members who obviously have the power to get rid of you, and just how do you collaborate or you do not collaborate. And obviously my CRO was trying to control the narrative, I think, about certain things. So wanted to get your perspective on that.
So evidently, given that I gave notice in September and the board didn't come back and say, no, don't go. I did not manage the board relationship as well as some others probably could have or would have. Some of that could be attributed to any number of things. And it wasn't that the board was really strong in marketing. The board actually was made up of a combination of someone who was strong in marketing, a strategic investor, which came from a corporate background, and then the early seed round investors. And the challenge we ran into, and where I had a lot of tension with the business, which is, again, miss on my end, should have clarified this before joining into the organization that we were completely aligned. I'm an enterprise guy. That's where I've historically have made my number. I've had teams who do the mid-market and SMB stuff, and I've managed inside sales teams. And my last W-2 role, I had 45 people inside my segment of the organization that included both account executives, account managers, and strategic account managers inside the organization. So I've managed the teams that manage those things, but that's never been my thing. The smaller stuff. We had one of the investors who was certain that the way we were going to grow the business was through mid-market, because when you look at mid-market, there's 9,000 mid-market customers that are inside our ideal customer profile. All we need to do is get whatever percent of those mid-market customers. The reality, how we hit 120% of our first half number in last year, and the fiscal year ends in June. We closed the largest deal that the business has ever closed with a multinational bank, 1.8 million pounds. We followed that up in Q3. I'm not part of the team anymore, Q3, with 2 other large banks. Ultimately, that's the number that's going to move and continue to drive investment. But the distraction inside the business today still is, we got to go after mid-market. We got to go after mid-market. We got to go after mid-market. So there's a disconnect between the board, the leadership, and the CRO that they brought in from an expertise there. So what could I have done better? I could have done a better job managing that expectation and really getting a better understanding of why they felt that mid-market was the way to go and what those numbers look like. Ultimately, when you're selling investment and you're generating money, the story that you use to generate money, it may be different than the actual customers that you're bringing in that start funding other aspects of the business. So sometimes those stories don't align. And this was an instance where the stories didn't align and I didn't lead properly through it.
All right, let's go to Wayne.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Follow on from Ben, really. Hey, Mike, nice to actually see you in person. Thanks for connecting with me on LinkedIn recently. Firstly, fuck the Brits. And then my question is, follow on. So did you have a relationship with the investors ahead of taking the role?
I didn't. No. I had presented that to them a couple of different times. I presented to them during the A round relative to the strategy that we were, the mechanics of how we had built the revenue organization, where revenue was going to come from, that whole thesis on that side, not specifically around breakout between mid-market and enterprise, but more about demand, acquisition, retention, and expansion. A lot of the stuff that you'll see me draw up on the whiteboards and how we built the team, but I did not have that relationship. I was always that was always kept at arm's length.
So the mid-market play was driven by the board or driven by the founders?
I believe it was driven by the lead seed investor.
Okay, so you don't know. Okay,
that's right. Yeah, I believe it was driven by the lead seed investor, though.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I have just a billion questions, but it's probably not appropriate. I don't want to monopolize. I could probably catch up with you.
I mean, I think it's, for what it's worth, I think it's pretty rare that a CRO VP of sales has relationships with the investors before taking the gig. Pretty rare, Wayne. It does happen as you're maybe more mature in your career and you've kind of been there, done that once or twice. So for example, let's say I'm a VP of sales or CRO at company A. We do pretty good. And I don't know, Menlo was the investor, right? And I had a good run there, and a year or two passes by where I'm not working there anymore. And somebody reaches out to me from Menlo and says, hey, we've got, a couple other gigs kind of coming online that you might be a good fit for. You did really well getting this company up off the ground. You should take a look. Some of that stuff happens, but is very rare in my experience.
Yeah. I mean, every CRO role I've had a relationship, a forced relationship.
I think that's pretty rare.
That's a trick. Is that a trick? What do you reckon?
Well, I think it's a smart trick. If you mean, is it a good idea to build and establish those relationships? Absolutely. It's not that easy, though. A lot of places you don't get access to the investors, or let alone the board. Yeah. And when it's such early stage like this, Mike and Scott, it is a shit show. We all know it's a shit show. It's so difficult. And the founders get all of this advice from all over the place. And like, you're the guy in the middle that's like, just go get the fucking money. Like, but there's all this shit flying around everywhere. And I'm just going to be the guy in the middle that's going to sort all this shit out without having... part of what makes the gig so difficult,
And I'm okay. Like, here's the deal, and I think I posted this earlier where somebody said something about basically the rules. I'm okay with the rules of the game changing in the middle of the game, as long as I know, because then I'm going to figure out a way to make it work or win, or come back and say, look, I'm out. And ultimately I got to the point where I just said, I'm out. Now, since September, my last trip to the UK to meet with the team in Canary Wharf was in February of 2020. I gave notice in September of 2021, not knowing when I was going to be able to get out there again. Had I been able to spend time with the team in the UK in that time period, things could have been different. There might have been a higher level of trust. There would have been less kind of uncertainty around capabilities. Fast forward to where we are now, and travel is open. Like, I mean, heck, I know this is recorded, but if Putin would have just invaded the Ukraine 6 months earlier, maybe things would have been a little bit different. And I say that with a joke, a smile on my face and joke, only because you just don't know what you know until you know. So be comfortable making the choices that you make, given the information that you have. And sometimes you're going to be right. Sometimes you're going to be wrong. I had a conversation with Scott when I came back from vacation. I went on vacation with my family in June of last year. And the first day of vacation, while kids were at the beach in Sarasota, I'm still on calls with my team. And I realized, I did not get the systems in place for me to be able to take a proper vacation, which is stupid at that point in time. I'd also lost 3 hours of time because now we're on the East Coast. So I've gained time on the team, but working late in the day with them, kids are at the beach, I'm on calls. That's where I started to say, this just isn't right. I'm not figuring it out. I need to start putting different systems in place. So I had a conversation with Scott, I think a couple of weeks later. And the basis of that conversation was, hey, you know what, go put the systems in place. And if you can make it work. And if you can't make it work, it doesn't work. Ultimately, I got the systems in place, still couldn't make it work. So I made a decision to leave in September. So that's kind of the evolution as we went through all of those things. Functionally, if you look at where we are, where the team is from a revenue perspective, did what needed to be done from a revenue growth perspective. It didn't happen through mid-market, though. It happened through enterprise, which is, again, what I had expected, but didn't align necessarily directly with the board. But I had already given notice. Like I gave notice before that large deal came in. So, maybe I was the boat anchor that kept it from happening. And then after I left, it popped up a couple of days later. Actually, I didn't leave. My last day was on December 31st. The deal was done earlier than that. Other questions?
We're all out of questions for now. Turn it back to you for a minute.
Yeah. So again, lessons learned. Number one, location proximity is really important. Working 8 hours behind with a team is tough to do. You've got to defend your creative time. So it doesn't mean that I couldn't do 3:30 in the morning calls or 4 o'clock in the morning calls a couple of times a week, but I didn't need to do them every day of the week. In hindsight, I should defended more of that time. The other thing that I made a mistake with is, and I'm making up for lost time in the last 90 days on LinkedIn, but I belonged on a milk carton when it came to social media. And one of the reasons why I belonged on a milk carton when it came to social media is my commitment started getting challenged at different points in time throughout this process. So even though I'm working my rear end off and just putting everything into this, I know that every time I put something else out there, it's looked at as, or whether I knew it or I felt it inside my heart or in my brain, I looked at it as, hey, what are you doing? Why are you spending time doing this when we need to be doing all of these other things? So ultimately, from a fit perspective, not being able to do the things I like to do relative to helping others also became draining on me relative to the role.
That quote is great, and Wayne typed it in. Defend your creative time. I love that.
Yes, absolutely, Wayne.
That resonates with everybody right here.
Absolutely,
good quote.
You got to defend it. And I'm a huge Jim Collins fan, and Jim Collins talks about that in the context of his foreword to the effective executive. Stop what you would not start. Don't trade certain hours for other hours. I'd say the words out loud, and then in the background, I wasn't actually living them in the way that that I expected out of somewhat of my capabilities. So when that disconnect became clear, I had to make a change. I had to make a change. And ultimately, I think that's another one of those things for everybody I hope people walk away with in this story is it's okay to change. You'll figure it out. The things I wish I would have done better. As soon as I gave notice, I should have been building pipeline for a catalyst. But instead, I worked through the stuff that I was working through and finished that up. And then I took January to find myself and get in better shape and do all of those things. And I'm still in the process of building out what I'm doing from a catalyst perspective. But in hindsight, I should have started building pipeline while I was there. So you can always build pipeline in the background as you go through and you make those changes. Fortunately, I've been, fortunately I had the flexibility of being able to do that though.
Mike, I have another question.
Fire away.
I'm kind of reflecting on something you said in the beginning.
Oh no.
Weren't really clear on product market fit. And so I'm kind of curious, do you really hire a CRO if you don't have product market fit? Like, is that the right hire? I mean, isn't it something that the founder would experience or try to sell the product first to determine product market fit? Would you hire a VP of sales first? And maybe it's VP of sales / CRO, maybe it's the same, but it just seems to me things were done out of order.
Definitely done out of order. Yep. So Jill, just here's where things changed. So we around the April, May, June time period, we brought in a sales engineer. And the reason we brought in a sales engineer is we started doing proof of concepts where we were going to integrate behavior data that existed inside organizations, large companies. We wanted to get behavior data to help inform some information that we needed to be able to say security hygiene is appropriate inside the organization. Well, anybody who's tried to get data from external sources, bring it into an internal system, do something with it, you realize that's really tough. I mean, just think about what it's like inside the sales enablement space when you take HubSpot data and integrate it with Salesforce, or you take from a marketing automation to CRM perspective, or you take Pardot data, even though Pardot is now part of Salesforce, now Marketing Cloud, and integrated into those systems. Anyhow, we started having really good conversations with those companies. We did some initial proof of concepts, and then we realized we didn't have the engineering capability or capacity to build those things out. So we put that on hold. Well, that created some challenges because we said we've got, from an engineering perspective, we need to deliver the things that we've sold to existing customers. We're going to stop doing some of this new behavioral stuff. And what everybody was excited about, investors, the bigger players in the market, was the behavioral side. So this is where we had this disconnect where, it drives me nuts when I see and somebody posted about it earlier today, and I forget where it was, but it's the whole fake it till you make it type stuff. Yeah, fake it till you make it. Yes, there's some aspects to it, but once you sell something, you've got to deliver it. Or if once you decide that you're not going to deliver it, then adjust and make some changes. And ultimately, we're still going through that. So, Jill, I think you're spot on relative to what we could have done differently. Hindsight being 2020. I would have said, don't take the money, don't put the money on me. Even though now going with the data that I had at that point, I still think I made the right decisions throughout that process. But if I could go back in time and make new decisions with the information I know now, I would have said, let's fix the demand side of things relative to where we're seeing the product work really well, because the product was working really well in some other areas, and then amplify that rather than get distracted by everybody wants to do the behavioral sciences, AI, cool stuff that people were talking about. I don't know if that helps, but those were growing pains we were going through inside the organization. And I felt comfortable as a leader helping us. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, this has been really illustrative. I mean, we always learn more from our failures than we do our successes. And so this is really helpful.
Good. I haven't started crying yet. Which is good.
Yeah, feel free. You're in a safe space. Go ahead. Good.
Thank you. So kind of going around, has this been helpful, or is there something where you're like, God, I just don't get certain things? Like what don't you get in the story? Because I'm a freaking open book. Yeah, go ahead.
So it's very, very helpful.
Okay, cool.
And I had the pleasure of going through a little bit of this with you. And even now, going back and hearing more about it, I mean, that product market fit, that was huge. You couldn't deliver. How can you do anything if you can't deliver, right? And every time I think you're making progress, it's slipping back. But I love that you're talking about failures. I agree with Jill. We learned so much more.
So one of the cool things about that big deal with the large bank, that was not behavior data. That wasn't all the shiny things that the investors bought into. What they bought into was the ability to deliver the things that we were already delivering inside the organization. So we had that. We still let all the other distraction get in the way of some of the other stuff that we were going through. So, and again, I would attribute all of this to lack of execution from a leadership perspective on my end. And I attribute that to, I don't want to sound blame. I attribute a lot of that to me being in a reactive mode and just being overtired. I mean, in June, I bottomed out at an average of 5 hours and 18 minutes of sleep a night. That's with catching up on the weekends. I'm now, as of this past weekend, at 6 hours and 51 minutes on average sleep. So pretty big change between June of last year and where I am now, which is good. You need sleep. And if you don't believe that you need sleep and you think you're a machine, read Matthew Miller's book around why we sleep, and you'll realize that you need sleep. I do have an Oura ring. I just put it on my charger too. That's where I got the data, Wayne. I could see it. I saw it in heart rate. I saw resting heart rate variability, and sleep. They were just falling apart. So I knew the data beyond what was going on inside me mentally. What else?
Mike, can you talk a little bit to the vetting process? Let's say you were going to go get a CRO or VP of sales job now.
Yeah.
What are some of the more hard-hitting investigative questions that you might ask a founder or founding team now to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position where you have the best odds for success?
Yeah, really good stuff. I'd be careful about the questions because some founders are extremely charismatic and full of shit. Now, ideally, we see those things pop up in the course of the conversation. But the more direct thing I would ask for, and I shared this with someone just the other day, I would ask for the most recent MBR and QB monthly business reviews and quarterly board reports that have been shared. I'd want to see access to them. I'm comfortable with them redacting some of the stuff that they need to redact as they go through it. And then I'll ask some questions around it, but I want to see how they're reporting success to people, both inside their, inside the management team, inside the investor team. And then the other one I'd like to see is what are they communicating in their all hands when they communicate out to the organization? Because what I'm looking for there is alignment. Are we communicating the same things? Where's the disconnect inside the organization? Do things match up? That's one thing I would do. The other thing I would do is I would ask for access to customers. In the same way that customers provide testimonials and endorsements to investors, I would want to speak to a couple of customers that they point out. And then in the background, I would figure out a way to get in front of some other customers or people that I know that are inside the organization. Ultimately, the due diligence question I should have asked is, hey, when things get really stressful inside the organization, what happens from a reaction perspective? I didn't ask that because I'd been around it and I thought I was seeing it, but I saw it. I joked with a bunch of people about this before. I can walk up and down the street in my neighborhood and I can see my neighbors outside and have a drink with them from time to time and wave hello to a bunch of them. I may even go in and have dinner or go have some barbecue in their backyard from time to time. If I get a flood in my house and I got to live with them for 2 weeks, there's a shitload more that I'm going to see in that 2 weeks than I saw the rest of the time. So Scott, that's how I would approach it. It's less about the questions in those things. It's more about the data. When it comes down to the questions, I would ask. The other thing I wish I would have done, there was a former CRO who was inside the business. I did not have a conversation with him beforehand. I knew him.
Talk to the last person. Talk to the last person type thing.
Talk to the last person. And I mean, I knew the people that were around his team. So I had some views around his capability from a leadership perspective and how he looked at running the sales organization. But I should have asked him, I should have said, hey man, when things went sideways and questions started coming up, what do you wish you would have known at that point in time? That would have been a good set of questions. Scott, did that hit the mark, or do you have another one there?
No, that's great. Vicky, let's go to you. I just saw you dropped a question in there.
Yes, my question is, how acceptable is it for you to renegotiate your contract once you lift up a couple of those rocks and you see what's under there? And how do you even begin to go about that? I was going to go about that, and then we just parted ways instead. So what could I have done?
Yeah. So fast forward to where I am now is I'm working on building up the business and realizing that I suck as an SDR when I exited, could I have renegotiated something, done something a little bit differently in the exit that kind of transitioned what role was as part of that rather than divorce? That's where I think I could have done some things a little bit better at that point in time. But at that point, I just wanted to blow things up. I was done. I needed out. I needed to start moving ahead. back to your question about, is it appropriate? I think it's always appropriate to renegotiate things. I expect at every 90-day period, I think going in and reassessing where things are. Here are some of the assumptions that we made. Here's what we realized actually have happened. Given the assumptions and what we've actually seen, what adjustments can we make here? Because one of the ones that drove me absolutely freaking nuts was when at one point in a conversation, I was challenged with put your money where your mouth is relative to the numbers that we had out there and variable, because of the way that I had set up my variable. And I said, I believe that I'm the only person on the leadership team that has a 50-50 comp plan. My money is where my mouth is. Like, and I keep deferring revenue as we go out through this. So every 90 days, I would go through the process of. I think you should be comfortable with going through that process.
Good stuff. Anybody else with some questions, or should Mike kind of continue on his story?
I have an add-on there. One thing I want to make sure you talk about, Mike, because this is really important, because we know going through these changes is really, really hard. And, depending on the runway that we have and so forth and so on, I want to see if you'll speak to the fact that you are so much happier now, just as far as being a human being and that sort of thing, because I feel the same way. I would rather be a slightly broker human being for 3 to 6 months and be able to sleep at night with some peacefully, and I just think that's worth speaking to.
You have to be fulfilled. And I know it's easy to say, and the only way to know whether or not you're fulfilled is be really clear about what fulfills you. Like, what's your purpose? What are you here for? What do you really enjoy doing? And then create opportunities to do more of that. Where Vicky and I met through this group, she'd asked a question about Clubhouse. I shared a link so she could get on Clubhouse a year and change ago. And then we started to we got closer through a lot of the interaction that I've done and she's done on Clubhouse. Clubhouse was my therapy on Saturday mornings because it was completely disconnected from the rest of the bullshit. But I actually had people who were asking questions around where I could provide informative information about what works, what doesn't work, get through all of the other crap. So that became my release. Now, we can all find releases. So one release might be this thing. This is not ideal, although it's good. It's not a great way to release. Another release can be walking a golf course and hitting a golf ball. And unfortunately, I'm going to be doing that in a week and change with Scott. Another release can be watching your sports team flounder.
Well, I don't think the losing is much of a release, Mike.
Well, it all depends. Like, this is the best time of year to be a Jets fan.
It's the off season. That's right.
It is the best time of year because
all we
have, like everybody else here, we have nothing but untapped potential. It's like that Geico commercial. We have nothing but untapped potential. So, so Vicky, thanks for asking the question. I think it's important to constantly ask yourself, are you fulfilled? Are you doing what brings you joy, brings you positive energy? What I found in a lot of the conversations that I would have with the CEO of the business is I would leave those conversations drained. I would be pounded up in conversations I would have with my team and conversations I would have with our customers. I would get really amped up and excited. And then I would have conversations with some other people and all of that would kind of decrease. And if we're building together out of the same mold, there should be this upward positive momentum. And those roles exist out there. Those people exist out there. There are leaders that are out there where you can find it. And if you're not finding it, ask your network. I mean, this is one of the other things I highlighted to Scott in the text message to him is community. Without access to him and being able to have conversations, I probably would have just grinned and bared it and grown through it. Yeah, and that's usually what I would do in these situations. Most of the companies I've been with, I've stayed a bit longer than I need to this was one where I exited before I broke down, and I'm happy I broke down. I'm happy I exited.
That's part of the lesson learned, is that when you know something's not right, you're comfortable pulling the ripcord rather than dragging it on. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vicky, thanks for the question. And Scott, thanks for being access to the community and having the conversations.
Yeah. Wayne had another question. You want to ask your question, Wayne?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Mike, I'm wondering upon reflection whether you think they saw you as like this revenue silver bullet that would just come in and suddenly things will just auto-magically change.
I don't know. So what I've done, Wayne, is I've asked members of the leadership team a couple of questions. Why would you recommend me as a coach or consultant or advisor? Why would you not recommend me? What have you gained as a result of me leaving the business? And what have you lost as a result of me leaving the business? What's interesting are some of the responses I've gotten back from that. Unfortunately, the CEO has responded back, and his primary piece of feedback is he didn't think that I really understood SaaS metrics well enough to be working as a CRO inside their organization. And I had Vili Itchev on the podcast, and if you know, Vili Itchev is with 2 Sigma. One of the things Vili and I aligned with is the importance of bookings over revenue, over recurring bookings over revenue. Because if you've got the bookings number coming through, the revenue number usually follows. And that was just an argument that the CEO and I would have, where functionally I moved my plan all based on ARR inside the business and kept my team's plan based on bookings up into the point that we would get to where it would make sense to shift the plan over. And I've designed, I've deployed comp plans for years. Like, this is not, I'm not reading a book to figure out how to go ahead and put together a comp plan. However, when we're getting into debates around ARR and bookings and that kind of stuff, we were distracted. We were over focusing on the wrong things. It'd be like me saying, I'm really excited about the football team because we've changed the color of the uniforms this year. Not because we actually have brought in better talent. So do I think they were looking for a silver bullet? I don't think they were looking for a silver bullet, but I also don't think they knew what they were looking for. And I think originally we agreed we were going to build it together up until the point that we were no longer building together. And I'm not completely sure, Wayne, when we started not building together, other than the questions that came around relative to the hiring of the marketing person. Like right now, they've replaced. So they took the money that they were paying me, and they've replaced that with they now have a proper chief marketing officer inside their organization. Which again aligns with what I think the board would have directed them on at the point in time. Is that, Wayne? Did that hit it, or did I miss something there?
Yeah, no, I think so. The SaaS metrics thing to me is just like kind of BS. I mean,
well, it's more than BS. Like, here's the deal.
Why is it BS?
Who gives a fuck? Here's why I say it's bullshit. Who gives a fuck? What are CAC to LTV ratio is when we're reporting on it on a month-by-month basis and not reporting on it on a rolling 12-month basis. If we have a CFO that's reporting on it on a month-by-month basis, which is a snapshot in time, and not reporting on it over a 12-month rolling basis, and the business continues to shift, are we even reporting on the right stuff? So now, granted, I went to Arizona State University. It took me a long time. Thank you. And it took me a long time to graduate. I graduated from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. I do not have my postgraduate degree in psychology. I've got a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology. I'm pretty good at the math stuff, but we were over focusing on numbers that didn't really count. They didn't really matter. They were vanity metrics that, if functionally, one of the biggest things that changed that shifted our, and the numbers escaping me, but shifted our, one of our ratios. And again, this is why I'm not a CRO anymore, because I don't understand SaaS.
I was going to say, that's quite funny.
So thank you. But one of the numbers that shifted was because this is being recorded. Somebody allocated certain money as recurring revenue when it wasn't really recurring revenue. And so, like, again, names can't be changed to withhold to protect the innocent, because you can look at my LinkedIn profile and see the names of all of these companies. But like, sometimes the numbers get shifted to tell a given story at a given point in time. So Wayne, yeah, I probably should understand SaaS metrics a little bit, but I'm a revenue guy who just generates revenue. And if you're generating revenue,
Scott, what's your take on that?
Yeah,
on the SaaS metrics thing.
I think the way Mike cut it up and described it, shout out to Mike drinking Clase Azul right now, by the way. Well done, Mike. Yeah.
Maybe broke, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
I still have taste.
Yeah. The way Mike kind of talked about it, that gets way off the spirit of why those metrics matter, I think. And, it doesn't necessarily matter what the score is throughout the game. What matters is what the score is at the end of the game. And so if you're looking at, I don't remember what he called it, LTV to CAC ratios on a monthly basis or whatever, like, you're going to stress yourself out massively, everyone in the organization. And people who look at that, it's like you're looking into a relationship to find a flaw with it. So if you stare at that thing enough, something's going to be broken. If I sit here and contemplate our relationship, hypothetical relationship, me and Mike or me and Wayne or whatever, we'll eventually figure out something we don't like about each other. And this relationship will start to sour and go bad. So if I'm looking at these metrics every day over and over and over, right, there'll be one point where, like, we don't close a deal for a few weeks and the numbers will skew and everything will look awful. And it will cause people to freak out and make, less than sound decisions potentially, right? But if you zoom out, the SaaS metrics matter. They really matter. The ARR matters. The retention number matters. The net revenue retention number matters. Customer acquisition costs matters. Lifetime value ends up mattering. All of these things, end up mattering on some level. But there's ways to look at the numbers and the data that don't put everybody under the gun all the time. And there's ways to look at the data that can freak you out every single day. Right. And so I think that's part of the struggle. And Mike sounds like he was in a situation where, every day some of these metrics were put in front of him and it was like, that metric is all terrible. Okay, well, we didn't close a deal yesterday, so the number skewed. If we close a big deal today, the metric will look amazing. So, that's kind of how I think about it. The metrics definitely matter. I see Alyssa's question about truly universal SaaS metrics. There was a Tequila Tuesday, I don't know, maybe in the teens somewhere, if you go back and listen to it, with a guy named Ray Reich, that you might want to go back and listen to, where all we did was talk about SaaS metrics. Richard Harris and I have done a couple chats on this. So they matter. They matter. You just you're hoping to get yourself out of a situation where somebody's hammering you about it every single day?
Yeah, I think you answered my question with if you stare at it enough, it will bother you. Because my initial reaction was also that it's BS. So I will check on those. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead, Mike.
So I think the hardest challenge is it's really easy to come up with a bunch of data. And I'm a data guy. Like, I love data. I love getting into the weeds around data and being able to start to say, okay, based on the data, is there an opportunity to optimize in this area? And where can we plug or unclog things? The challenge that happens is when it's never enough, when the data keeps changing, when you're like, okay, and this is, again, frustration relative to the relationship. We would deliver pieces of information, and then all of a sudden there was another layer that we wanted to get access to. And my view is, just what are we going to be measured on? What's the scoreboard? Are we winning or are we losing? Are we moving in the right direction or are we not moving in the right direction? And be okay with that, rather than having 10 different numbers that take 2.5 hours to put together by pulling multiple pieces of data out of HubSpot and then putting them into a different situation. Now, granted, HubSpot evolved over the time that I was engaged with the organization. HubSpot actually allows you to do pivot table work inside their custom dashboards now, which is awesome that you can do that kind of work. Originally, the only way for you to be able to see some of the historic data was if you actually grabbed historic data at that point in time. So, it just, from a relationship standpoint, I had a strong relationship with people inside HubSpot where I had direct access to people on their product side that could influence the way that reports were being built and updated inside HubSpot as a platform. And I've been at this a while. I've got a good network of people. Ultimately, even with all of that, we were still chasing things that in hindsight, I would say, doesn't really matter. And the three questions I would ask around that would be what, so what, and now what. So what is it that we're focused on? So what are we actually going to do with it? What does it mean? Now what? What's the action that we're going to take? Because if it's just stuff to report on because we want to report on it, it's a vanity metric, then, why are we doing it? What is that important? Scott's talked about this a number of times in things that he's posted around how important it is to have a RevOps person inside the business. Ultimately, the person who I had inside the business that I was converting into a RevOps person, I still think it was a mistake that he left the business, and he and I are still shoot the shit with each other from time to time. He was a product marketing guy that wanted to stay in product marketing. I was trying to convert him into a revenue enablement type role. And ultimately that didn't work. He left the business. He left the business, I think, in May. So we had some other turnover. So again, everything has layers. Like, we can peel back another layer, another layer, another layer. The book at some point in time, if I ever sit down and start writing, will be phenomenal. But even just this conversation is a bit of therapy as we go through it. My point on the numbers, I wrote LTV to CAC, average ARR at individual market segments was another one that we were keeping track of. We didn't really worry about NRR. We worried more about ARR. And in hindsight, I think that was a mistake that we weren't reporting on NRR. We were reporting on churn, and we were reporting on net negative churn. But one of the things I implemented inside the organization is actually comping our customer success team on putting a variable plan in place for a customer success team. So they were focused not just on what do we do to keep revenue from going away, but what are we actually doing to expand business? Because my view on growth is if you're growing an account, it's going to continue to renew. It just happens by default. I've only had one instance where a growing account didn't renew. And the reason that happened is we had changeover in the senior leadership inside that organization, and that was when I was back in my Safari or O'Reilly, my W-2 days. So one of the pieces of feedback that I got from the COO that left in June, I asked him recently, his name's Sean. I said, what was the biggest thing you got out of my tenure, my time inside the organization? And he was the co-founder of the business, left the business in June of last year. He said, you were able to install a common vocabulary across the organization when it came to revenue. Common vocabulary across the entire organization when it came to revenue and sales.
That's pretty rare inside one company, let alone inside an industry.
Well, inside a company.
I know, I'm saying it's rare inside a company. And then I was going, good Lord, imagine every company speaking the same language.
So, and part of it is because I like simplifying sales shit and doing it with non-sales people. And that's a passion of mine because I think all of us are selling no matter what role we're in, and we can use all of these things. So it was really important to me. In hindsight, did it distract me? Great. I implemented an operating system and a vocabulary inside the organization, but I'm not part of the organization any longer. So I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but ultimately from the COO's perspective, that changed. Sales was no longer a black box inside that organization. We communicated better across product and sales and product and sales inside the organization. Relatively small company. I mean, right now there's still only 50 people. They're going to grow significantly though here pretty soon as a result of the. All right, I'm just going to ask again. Is this helpful, guys, or am I just personal therapy in front of a microphone and looking at a couple of people?
I think it's always helpful to watch somebody else go through therapy live on camera in front of Lord knows how many people. I mean, that's why all these daytime TV shows work and all these reality shows work and all this kind of shit, right? We're all really good voyeurs, man. What else we got? What other questions?
I don't want to monopolize, but I have loads. I don't want to monopolize.
Monopolize, Wayne. Monopolize away.
Mike, I think you're going to answer this because I already have figured out the kind of guy that you are just by listening to you for the last 45 minutes. And kudos to you for just standing up and doing this. I want to say that outspoken. I'll shake your hand, give you a hug on the golf course in Florida, whatever you need. I'm there for you as a fellow CRO.
Just remember that, Scott. He said, whatever I need on the golf course in Florida. That's what I heard. So,
yes. Well, I've played golf with Wayne before. He's a good golf partner.
Good.
And you don't have to answer this, but do you feel on any level that your face just didn't fit, and that was the reason?
Say that again. That what didn't fit?
Did you feel like on any level that your face didn't fit?
Your face? Did you say face?
Oh, maybe maybe this is a British expression.
I'm pretty sure it is, Wayne.
Just remember, Wayne. So
I'm thinking Mike's got a pretty good face. I don't know.
And Wayne, the one thing I wish I would have started watching Ted Lasso before I started engaging with everybody over there, because I would have understood a lot of the other shit that we had to work through from a language perspective. I don't know if my face fits anywhere.
I get it. Like, which is why I got that reaction from you. So I know how you felt, right? Because all of you just looked at me like, what the fuck did he just say? But you guys, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, you're in a company and like for whatever reason, you're never going to win. Did you ever feel that?
Yeah. So I'll give you a really good example. I don't have the microphone up here for show. I've published a podcast on a weekly basis every week since October of 2016, with the exception of June, July, and August of last year. I went to 2 per month during that period of time because we ran out of content. I know how to publish content. I know how to put the systems in place in order to publish content. One of the things I was doing, not revenue generating, but long-term going to build out a podcast where we bring customers into the discussion. And I knew how to build content where it wouldn't be a distraction. We would build in batches. I've got 12 episodes that are sitting there in the can, ready to go. I will not miss another week again. It won't let it happen. When I announced in front of the all hands meeting that we were in the process of getting ready to kick this off, the comment that I got from the CEO was, let's make sure that we've got representative voices on the podcast, or that it represents, SciSafe or whatever it was, which all of a sudden started to shift and change to, hey, are we really, like, no shit. I'm not going to go throw a bunch of fucking white dudes, out there on a podcast when we've got a Black CEO. The 3 hires that I made inside the business were all women: account executive, customer success, head of demand gen. That throwaway comment, I looked at it and I was like, what are we doing here? Like, what does that mean? So Wayne, that's how I would answer was I the wrong face? I think there's a chance that I was, but I'm going to control what I can control. And I think the piece that I struggled with in all of that was, it was never enough. Like, there always had to be something else that could be done a little bit differently. There always had to be another piece that was on there, which is not a me issue. That's a leadership issue inside the organization. So again, knowing that this is recorded, knowing that we're all friends here, but that's how I would answer that question. So maybe I wasn't the right face, but I don't know who would be the right face. Like another piece of advice I gave the CEO as part of my exit. I said, look, always ask yourself, am I wearing clothes? And if everybody around the table is telling you that your clothes are awesome, make sure you ask some other people, are you wearing clothes? And again, like highly decorated military veterans, like awesome. I mean, again, this is a guy I will continue to have drinks with. Good guy, just wasn't the right fit for me. And that was so no matter what I would have been able to do, even if I would have extended it out, I think we probably would have gotten to the same place from a fit perspective. So, Wayne, I don't know if that hit the mark or not, but
yeah,
again,
I think sometimes you just know, right? Sometimes there's just this feeling inside where you're like, wait a minute, like there's that throwaway comment, or there's just something else that's gone on. And you're like, wait a minute, wait a second.
Yeah.
Cool.
Also, I just wasn't very English.
We're getting close to the end of the show. We got a couple questions that just came in, and I want to try to get to them. Let's go to Evan first, and then we'll go to Vicky M this time.
So I'm sitting here listening to Wayne's question, and I think that there's perhaps a different layer of this that, for me, like, this is something that I think about every day in almost every interaction that I have. And I'm wondering, to what extent are you familiar with narcissism, and to what extent do you think that might have played a role in at least how senior leadership was managing things with regard to, driving on LTV over CAC, or you keep saying control the things that you can control, and that says to me there were things put on your plate that you didn't have a whole lot of control, or maybe not even all that much influence about. So I guess my question is, how much do you think that was an impact here, and what did, if anything, what did you learn that could highlight that, hey, this might be an issue in the interview process at another organization in the future?
Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever do a CRO role again. So I don't know that I'll ever go through the interview process.
There we go.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. Like, I've joked with some people that I may have to start selling my body on the corner. But there's that's not. I'm better. Like, one of my strengths is asking the question in the room that nobody else wants to ask. And it's not because I'm a jackass. It's because I know it's the question that nobody wants to ask. And I know it's important. I believe that it's important to surface whatever that thing is. So some people handle that well. I mean, one of the books that we read as a leadership team was Radical Candor. unfortunately, we weren't super comfortable with radical candor, right? Like,
funny story. I actually interviewed at the company of the person that wrote that book, and they rejected me without giving me any kind of feedback as to why they didn't want to hire me.
Yeah. Well, another book that we read was what's the Netflix book on hiring? No Rules Rules. We read that, but we cherry pick the pieces of the book that we wanted. Now, here's the other thing that's unique about me. Although I went to Arizona State University, I do read, I do recall, and I do challenge. So when we started cherry picking certain pieces, I asked some questions and I said, okay, so if we want to hire the best of the best, one of the parts of that was that we would overpay market value for the best of the best. Another question. So here's, somebody asked the question earlier, were there questions? Scott, you asked the questions I would have asked differently. I wish I would have asked this question, and I wish I would have asked the question of the CFO and the CEO separately. When I need to purchase this, do I need approval? When I need to purchase a car, do I need approval? When I need to purchase a house, do I need approval? And what does that approval process look like? Because I didn't have that question until we started getting deeper into things, and I started wanting to bring on components to the tech stack and make certain investments. So that's another question I would have asked separately with the CEO and the CFO, and then did a little bit of pattern matching there. So as far as the narcissist piece, you know what? I mean, people are people. You know, like you operate with people who are high performers in certain areas, and they've got all of the different character traits that they're going to have in those areas. Sometimes you fit on the team and sometimes you don't fit on the team. This just wasn't the right fit. Wasn't the right fit for me. As much as I tried to make it the right fit, and I still believe, I believe I'm a better asset to that organization outside of the organization than I am inside the organization, because I started playing with my hand tied behind my back. I started pulling punches. I wasn't asking those questions as much. And then when I started asking the questions, then it was received as I wasn't aligned. One of the other cool things that we did, imagine this, you're in the month, I forget if this was May or June. May or June was rough time period. We decided to roll out a free tier version of our product that, oh, by the way, didn't have any restrictions on what free tier could access. So then you had channel partners coming back to us saying, hey, when I go and I test this free tier, I can do all of the things that we do with your regular product.
Yeah. So why
am I paying for it? I was like, well, because this is, and yeah, so again, we peel back layers, we start to get deeper and deeper into it. And if there's any follow-up questions that people have around this, I am happy to, I'm an open book, as you can see. Please realize that this is my perspective. It's not indicative of the entire organization's perspective. I'm good at what I do. I failed in this instance.
I got a lot of respect for the volume of humility that you brought into this conversation. Like, it's really kind of astounding. And if that is who you are, like on a day-to-day basis, like, first of all, fantastic. But it's also, in my experience, like that asking those uncomfortable questions, that realizing, oh, my hands are getting tied behind my back right now. All of that is to me indications of a human system that's plagued by narcissism, and I think that might be playing a kind of nefarious under the water, kind of role in this. But like, credit to you, like, you have, if this level of humility is completely like who you are all the time, fantastic. It's like garlic to vampires in the narcissistic world. So kudos.
Thanks. Evan, I am like Popeye. I am what I am, but so I don't know. Scott called my bullshit. Vicky called my bullshit. We talk with each other more often than a lot of the other folks. Like,
I can't.
Yeah.
I can't call bullshit.
I can't either.
No. All right, let's go to Vicky Maraza, and then we will wrap up.
Mike, thank you very much for being such a guy next door. This has been a great session. Really appreciate that. You mentioned that one of your strengths was bringing in people with non-tech backgrounds, and that your own experience was in enterprise, but that you've led teams that are inside sales, SMB, et cetera. So I was wondering, as someone who's trying to break into tech from a non-tech background, what are some of the traits that you've seen in successful sales reps?
Yeah. So just to clarify, I focus on technical founders, people who do not have a who do not have a background in sales. One of the reasons I focus, actually, I think, why do you think I focus on people who don't have a background in sales? Anyone?
Because they're a clean slate. They don't have bad habits to unlearn.
No bad habits.
Yeah.
They don't know what they don't know. They literally are a clean slate. And here's the beauty of them, especially with technical founders or founders who are operationally oriented, engineers. They like the idea of systems and process, and they understand if I have the right system and process in place, I can start doing things in a repetitive format. Think about Scott, addicted to the process. I can do things in a repetitive format. And when I do things in that repetitive format, if the results start to change, then something's changed. Something's different. Either my process is broken, or where I'm focusing my attention is broken, or something else is wrong. But whatever it is, I know that something's wrong, not because of a gut feeling, but because of data that I have. So for people who want to break into tech, the first question I would ask is, why do they want to break into tech? The reason I ask that question is because if you're like me and you buy new tech and you had an Apple Newton and you pick up this stuff, you start to gather gadgets, then breaking into tech is a little bit easier. I'm also an Excel person. Like I went through and I did the LinkedIn certification for Excel, so I could get the Excel badge on my LinkedIn profile, which will demonstrate that I'm somewhat of a nerd. But there are people who think of things in the context of design and operating systems and are excited about those things. If you're not that person, breaking into tech might not be the right thing. Now, on the flip side, the other side of tech that I focus on is enablement tech. And I specifically focus on enablement tech because I believe technology should be used to help people do the things they want to do and need to do better. It should enable humans to do better human things. It shouldn't get in the way of things. This is why sales enablement, revenue enablement, and I believe at some point in time, we are going to evolve, and you've heard it first here, we will evolve to organization enablement. And if you go to organizationenablement.com, it will take you to the Catalyst Sales site. But so organization enablement will be a thing at some point in time, and that'll be an evolution of what we're seeing from a learning and development and HR and tech stack perspective. But so I would go through those questions about why tech. Ideally, what you do is you find people who are passionate about the industry or the vertical. I care about dogs, or I care about golf, or I care about humans doing better human things. And if you've got that and you understand that, then you can get to the point of understanding the problem at a deep level. You can empathize with people on the other end, and then you can actually start getting really good at this thing this craft we call sales. But I wouldn't do it just because, holy crap, there's a lot of money in tech, and tech is just flying off the shelves, so I want to go do some of the tech stuff. That might work for some people. It's for me, if you're taking someone who's never sold before, that's a recipe for disaster. They got to care about the problem. I don't know if that helped, Vicki. Was that helpful? Okay.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. We're a little bit out of time, overtime here. Want to thank Mike, want to thank Sendoso and all of the Scotty's Little Sales Club patrons. Mike, anything you want to say to get us out of here? What's the best place for people to connect with you and find you and get in touch with you?
Best place, LinkedIn and Twitter. Those are the two places. Send me direct messages. I still watch my direct messages. I don't have the kind of following that makes it impossible to watch. Those are good places. Do not send me an email. Email is where stuff goes to die. So direct message either via Twitter or LinkedIn. And I'm Mike Simmons on LinkedIn. I was early enough there. That's the gray hair and wrinkles. And I'm Simmons_M on Twitter. And if you like this stuff, you can listen to 284 episodes of the Find My Catalyst podcast. And that gets published every week. I bring pretty cool people on there. Scott's been on there before.
Yeah.
I don't bring a lot of salespeople on because my primary focus is on helping people. I've even renamed the podcast. So it's not Catalyst Sale Podcast anymore. It's Find My Catalyst. So people can find that nudge so they can start doing what's next. But those would be the three places: Find My Catalyst, connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with me on Twitter. And I think if you listen, you'll realize what you see is what you get.
Right on. All right. Thanks again, Mike. We'll see you soon. See y'all next time.